So I want to thank the Ontario Halfway House Association and Larry Cook for inviting me here to speak today. Just before I begin, another side note. This is based on my PhD research that basically tried to map out the scope of prison expansion in Canada. As you may be aware, working in this field, you might not even know the amount of prisons that are being built in the jurisdictions that you work in. And that's because, for the most part, authorities often do not tell the workers, do not tell the communities that are implicated where prisons are going to be built until the shovels are in the ground and it's already too late to contest what's going on. And I'm sure you've encountered a bit of that at your meeting in the past few days here. So basically, to get all this information I'm presenting to you today, what I needed to do is, first I did an online content search to see how many prisons were being advertised, new prisons being advertised. Didn't reveal too much. Then I phoned all the prison authorities, there's 14 across Canada, and asked them, how many prisons are you building? Got a couple more results as we'll go through later. And then I filed access to information requests with all the prison authorities across Canada, and that took me about a year of negotiation to try and get all these documents and the data that I'm going to present to you today. Some prison authorities, as you'll see on blank slides, refuse to disclose any information, which I find unacceptable in a democratic country such as Canada. So,
Don't let them touch that button.
Okay, I'll just do this. Okay, so now for the highlights, I guess. The slides move. Anyways, all right.
Let Larry fix it while you go on.
Okay, so there are currently 22 new prisons and 16 prison expansions at various stages of completion being established by provincial territorial governments across the country. These new facilities will add over 6,500 new prisoner beds at a construction cost of over $2.8 billion. According to a document obtained by Kingston Whig Standard journalist Rob Tripp, the Correctional Service of Canada will be expanding 35 of its institutions as part of its plan to absorb the influx of new prisoners resulting from federal sentencing reforms. In a recent article by CSC Commissioner Don Head, it was acknowledged that the agency projected a 3,400 prisoner increase as a result of one piece of legislation, Bill C-25, the Truth in Sentencing Act, which eliminated credit for time served in remand. Public Safety Minister Vic Toews has stated that this initiative alone will cost the federal treasury $2 billion, a drastic increase from the original $89 million figure provided by the Government of Canada, which is also still quite far from the nearly $5 billion figure federal cost projected by the Independent Parliamentary Budget Officer of Canada in June 2010. In the wake of the release of the PBO report, Commissioner Head also stated that CSC is developing a long-term plan that takes into account the need to replace some penitentiaries that have withstood the test of time for many decades and no longer meet the requirements of a modern correctional system. With prisons under construction from coast to coast to coast, the question we are left to ask is, why is this happening? What are the factors that are driving the current prison boom in Canada? Turning to the criminological literature, it would be in vogue to say that this country has joined other jurisdictions in taking the punitive turn. Those subscribing to this view would point to the rhetoric of politicians on the need for longer and harsher sentences, prison construction initiatives, and our now growing prison population. While I don't deny that these developments are taking place, there are significant limitations to the punitive turn thesis. As noted by Matthews and Carrier, this explanation of prison growth ignores continuities in punishment practices by juxtaposing a punitive present to a nostalgic and benevolent rehabilitative past. makes totalizing claims about the factors driving prison expansion by focusing on the rhetoric of politicians, ignores contradictory evidence, and paints an overly stark portrait of the carceral present. I argue that the story of Canadian prison expansion is more complicated than concluding that a nation has simply taken a turn down the wrong road. When I was a young boy, whether I was sitting in the back of my mom or dad's car, I always offered my 2 cents on how we could arrive at our destination the fastest, as if shaving seconds or minutes off our commute would make a difference in the grand scheme of things. When I would play the backseat driver, my mom would tell me to sit back and enjoy the ride, while my dad would say, "Justin, tous les chemins mènent à Rome." In other words, the destination is the same, no matter which road we take. And this is the central argument I'm making today. When looking at the internal justifications by policymakers for building new prisons, articulated in unpublished government records I obtained using access to information and other data collection approaches, I argue that prison expansion in Canada is occurring as a result of a simultaneous pursuit of progressively couched objectives that seek to improve the conditions in our prisons and punitively couched objectives that seeks to place more people in prisons for longer periods of time with fewer chances of release into the community once incarcerated. So, I begin my presentation today by providing an overview of prison construction in Canada and demonstrating, like others before me, that carceral expansion, whether couched in progressive or punitive language, is the product of the exercise of reform itself, where the role of punishment is reimagined to perpetuate the existence of imprisonment. From there, I outline critiques. Sorry, too loud? Right.
Keep going.
From there, I outline critiques regarding the substantive problems associated with increasing the use of imprisonment and how these initiatives are being enacted at this time. And I conclude with a discussion on how the future can otherwise be different and what we can each do in our capacity as professionals and citizens to take a different road, one that leads us down a path towards building communities, not destroying them.
Oh, sorry, Justin, what do the balloons indicate?
Oh, okay. I'm just going to go back here.
Oh, sure.
Anyways. Okay, so what the balloons indicated was all the prisons that are being established across Canada. So you saw some up on the map towards Nunavut, some as far west as Surrey, BC, and some as far east as St. John's, Newfoundland. And the colors of the bubbles indicate basically the phase of the project implementation. So we have, for instance, preliminary planning, trying to map out what the need is to build new prisons, design and site selection, procurement, construction, and then which prisons are operational. For those who are interested, I can send you my slide presentation via email, because it doesn't look like it's going to work that well today.
Were these provincial, territorial, federal, or all
Those
of the
were
above?
all provincial territorial prisons. Those don't include the 35 expansions to federal penitentiaries. Okay, so I'm going to press on. So the following is information related to prison construction initiatives in Canada that I included in a report I submitted to the federal, provincial, territorial heads of corrections in May 2010, which I also presented to the PT group later that month. So as of this past May, new prisons or additions to existing facilities were in the process of being planned or were being built in every Canadian province or territory. So in Newfoundland and Labrador, an October 2008 independent report that examined the policies, procedures, and administration of provincial prisons recommended that the system as a whole adopt a dynamic security approach in its institutions that promotes contact between staff and prisoners. The review also proposed that more focus be placed on the humane treatment of prisoners and rehabilitation efforts. Poor hygiene and safety hazards linked to the age of many of the facilities in the province, as well as lacking specialized space for Aboriginal women and overcrowding, were all cited as key challenges facing the system. So prior to the completion of the report, the provincial government commissioned a feasibility study to evaluate whether to build 1 or 2 facilities to replace Her Majesty's Penitentiary in an effort to modernize their prison system. They also committed to building a new pretrial detention center for youth, women, and individuals with mental illnesses in Labrador prior to the review. Both of these projects remain on hold until a review of all facilities is undertaken in a stated effort to ensure that the province is able to meet future challenges going forward, hence the TBD, to be determined, across there. All right, we're in business.
Yay.
All right, so in Prince Edward Island, the provincial government tabled a position paper in response to a review of its prison infrastructure, conducted by North 46 Architecture in November 2008. A first challenge in these documents, or outlined in these documents, was that the province now had to cope with a changing prisoner population, a significant portion of which was composed of individuals suffering from substance abuse and mental illness, a 50-50 split between sentenced and remanded prisoners, as well as a 400% increase in the number of incarcerated women. Aging institutions, which pose challenges to institutional safety and security, persistent facility overcrowding, and anticipated federal legislation initiatives were all cited as reasons for constructing additional facilities. While 3 facility configuration options were proposed, the provincial government decided not to pursue any of the alternatives presented and is currently constructing a 48-bed addition to the Provincial Correctional Centre in Charlottetown. Once completed, an assessment of whether additional capacity will be needed in the province's prison system that would require the replacement of the aging 18-bed Prince County Correctional Centre in Summerside with a new 60-bed facility will take place.
Justin, as you go through this presentation, is it possible to identify which ones are women only, if there are some that are women only,
Sure.
or how many beds you're talking about?
Okay, sure. Okay, so prompted by an escape of a prisoner in April 2008, the Nova Scotia Department of Justice commissioned an independent review of its prison system. The report noted a number of challenges related to physical infrastructure, including a changing prisoner population, we're going to hear that a lot today, now composed of additional remanded prisoners, and a system that was close to full or over capacity a significant period of the time. Noting that single accommodation was the policy of the provincial prison system, the report pointed out that other jurisdictions have simply redefined the term capacity to allow for double and triple bunking when the need arises. It's happening elsewhere. Other options adopted by other prison authorities to deal with systemic overcrowding outlined in this report included accommodating adults in youth facilities, retrofitting recreational and administrative spaces to allow for additional beds, building new facilities, and using administrative releases. Having been aware of the issues outlined above well before the independent review of its prison system, the provincial government had planned to build 2 new prisons, including a 100-bed replacement facility in Antigonish County and a 50-bed replacement facility in Cumberland County. However, following the election of the NDP, the government of Nova Scotia abandoned these plans in favor of constructing a larger 200-bed replacement facility in a location to be determined. They're currently examining 3 sites. They're all male facilities.